That spot had hurt so bad. The rancher checks and discovers something horrific. But John had been a rancher for most of his life. The ranch he worked on had been in his family for generations, stretching over rolling hills, wide pastures, and small forests. Every morning, long before the sun rose, he would be up, moving through the fields, checking the cattle, repairing fences, and making sure everything on the land was in order. It was a life that required hard work, patience, and a love for the land, and John had all three in abundance, but on this particular morning something felt different. He was out in the pasture walking along the fence line when he felt a sharp pain in his side. At first he thought it was just a cramp or maybe a muscle strain from bending over to fix the gate the day before. He rubbed the spot lightly, hoping it would go away. After all, ranch life was full of aches and pains, and he had learned to ignore them. The pain, however, did not go away. Over the next few days, it grew more persistent. It wasn't constant, but whenever he moved in a certain way, twisted to lift a sack of feed, or even bent down to tie a rope, it stabbed sharply like a small knife pressing under his skin. John tried to ignore it, telling himself that ranch work was hard, and everyone got aches like this from time to time. He didn't want to worry Mary, his wife, and he certainly didn't want to think that it could be something serious. Mary noticed his discomfort almost immediately. She had been preparing breakfast when she saw him wince as he lifted a bale of hay into the barn. "John," she said gently, placing her hand on his arm. "What's wrong with you? You look pale." "It's nothing, Mary," he said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just a little strain from the fence repairs."
"I'll be fine."
She had known John long enough to know when he was trying to hide something. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept rubbing the same spot on his side. "John," she said again, more firmly this time. "You're not fine. You need to check it." "It's not normal to be hurting this badly just from work."
He shook his head, stubborn as ever.
"I can't waste time going to a doctor for something small. We have too much to do here."
The cattle, the fences, the fields. It all needs attention. Mary sighed. She knew arguing with John would not work. Proud, stubborn, and used to handling everything on his own. But she also knew that ignoring the pain could be dangerous. Over the next few days, she kept a careful eye on him, watching for changes, trying to encourage him to rest. But John kept working, hiding his pain behind forced smiles and stiff movements. The ranch life didn't give anyone a break. Every day had its chores, and delays could be costly. The cows needed feeding, fences needed repair, water troughs had to be cleaned, and the small vegetable garden Mary kept for their meals demanded attention. Despite the pain, John continued with his routine, moving through the tasks with a careful rhythm. But deep inside, he was beginning to worry. The pain was no longer just an occasional, sharp jab. It had become a persistent, nagging ache, a constant reminder that something was wrong. One evening after a long day, John sat on the porch, wiping sweat from his brow. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, and the wind carried the faint smell of hay and soil. He rubbed the painful spot again and winced. Maybe it's time, he thought. Maybe he couldn't ignore it anymore. He had been stubborn, thinking he could push through anything, but this was different. This pain was personal, deep, and persistent. Mary joined him on the porch, sitting close, her hand finding his. "John," she said softly, "I think you need to look at it. Right now. Don't wait." He nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and relief. Fear because he didn't know what he might find, and relief because he knew Mary was right. He needed to face it. He went inside and stood in front of the mirror, pulling up his shirt carefully. The spot was small, just a few inches wide, but the skin around it looked slightly red. He pressed lightly, trying not to flinch, and that was when he felt it, a hard, unusual lump beneath the surface. It wasn't tender like a bruise. It felt strange, almost solid. John's heart started to beat faster. He had faced storms, broken fences, and stubborn cattle, but this was unknown. He didn't know what it was or what it meant. Panic started to creep in, and he felt a cold shiver run down his spine. For a moment he stood frozen, staring at the spot, thinking about all the worst possibilities. Mary came closer, looking over his shoulder. "What is it?" she asked gently. I don't know," John admitted, his voice low. "It feels strange, hard, not like anything I've ever felt before." She took his hand, squeezing it. "We'll find out. You're going to see a doctor. We can't just wait and hope it goes away."
The decision wasn't easy.
The nearest clinic was over an hour's drive away, and John hated going to doctors. But deep down, he knew they had no choice. That night they packed a small bag for the trip, checking and rechecking everything they might need. John barely slept, his mind racing with questions. Was it serious? Was it dangerous? Could it wait? The next morning, they loaded into their old pickup truck, the engine rumbling as they drove down the winding dirt road that led off the ranch. The wind whipped through the open windows, and the fields rolled past in green and gold. John stared out the window, lost in thought. But each bump in the road made him flinch from the pain, reminding him again of the spot that hurt so badly.
Mary kept glancing at him, her hand resting gently on his arm.
"It's going to be okay," she said, though she too felt the worry gnawing at her. John nodded but didn't speak. The truth was, he didn't feel okay. He had faced many challenges in his life, but this was different. This was personal. This was his own body, something he couldn't fix with tools or hard work. As the clinic appeared in the distance, John felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief because soon he would know what was wrong, and dread because he feared the answer might be worse than he imagined. He parked the truck, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The sterile smell of the clinic, the quiet hum of the lights, and the distant voices of nurses made him feel small and vulnerable.
A nurse greeted them and took them to a small room. John sat down, trying to steady his breathing.
Mary stayed close, holding his hand, giving him the courage he felt he lacked. He rolled up his shirt again, showing the spot to the nurse. She examined it carefully, her brow furrowing slightly.
"Let's get a doctor in here,"
she said, breaths. "We need to take a closer look." John nodded, his stomach tight with worry. He had faced many hardships on the ranch, but nothing had prepared him for this. The unknown was worse than any storm, any broken fence, or any stubborn animal. This was something he couldn't control, something that demanded attention and courage. But as they waited, John thought about the ranch, the cattle, and the life he had built.
He thought about Mary, about the mornings they spent together, about the quiet nights on the porch.
He thought about how fragile life could be, how one small pain could grow into something far bigger than anyone imagined. The hours passed slowly. Every sound in the clinic seemed louder than usual. The soft click of shoes in the hallway, the distant ringing of a phone, the murmur of voices outside the door. John kept rubbing the spot as if touching it could make the fear disappear, but it only reminded him that he had to face what was coming. Finally, the doctor arrived. He was calm and professional, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that made John's heart skip a beat. The doctor asked questions about the pain, when it had started, what it felt like, and if there were any other symptoms. John answered as honestly as he could, describing the sharp pain, the hard lump, and the way it interfered with even the simplest tasks. The doctor nodded thoughtfully.
"We'll need to run some tests,"
He said.
"I want to be thorough." It could be nothing serious, but we need to be sure."
John nodded. Deep down, he knew he was right. Ignoring it had been easy at first, but now there was no turning back. But pain had forced him to stop, to pay attention, and to confront the unknown. Mary squeezed his hand. Inspiration.
"No matter what it is, we'll face it together,"
she said. John looked at her and managed a small, nervous smile.
"Together," he echoed. That night, back at the small motel they had booked near the clinic, John lay awake, thinking about the day.
The ranch seemed far away, almost unreal. He thought about the spot that had hurt so badly, and for the first time, he felt the weight of his own mortality.
The ranch had always been a place of strength and endurance, but this was a battle he couldn't fight with tools or muscle. This was a battle of patience, courage, and hope.
As he drifted into a restless sleep, John didn't know what the tests would reveal. He only knew that his life had changed. The pain in that small spot had opened a door he could not close. And beyond that door lay a challenge far greater than anything he had faced on the ranch.
The next morning, John woke to the faint sound of birds outside the motel window. The soft chirping should have felt comforting, but it only reminded him that life outside the clinic carried on, unaware of the storm he was facing.
He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his hand instinctively moving to the spot that had been troubling him for weeks. It ached just as much as yesterday, a constant burning reminder that something was wrong. Mary was already awake, sipping tea quietly, her gaze occasionally flicking to John. She had tried to sleep, but, like him, her mind had refused to rest. She had watched John struggle through pain for days, and now that they were finally here, she feared the unknown almost as much as he did.
"Morning!"
she whispered softly, trying to sound casual, though her voice betrayed the worry she felt.
"Morning," John replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, wincing slightly as he moved.
The pain was sharper now, almost like it had grown overnight. He rubbed the area lightly, grimacing at the hardness beneath the skin. He couldn't ignore it anymore. The ranch, the cattle, the daily chores, they all felt distant compared to the unknown threat that lived in his own body. Best. After a quick breakfast, they returned to the clinic. The sterile smell and the soft hum of fluorescent lights welcomed them back, a reminder that there was no turning back. Bess. John's stomach twisted with unease. Every step he took toward the examination room felt heavier than the last, weighted down by worry and fear. Mary stayed close, her hand brushing his occasionally, offering silent comfort. The doctor was waiting, a calm, steady presence that contrasted sharply with the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside John. "Good morning, John. Good morning, Mary," he said, his tone professional yet kind. "We're going to take a closer look at that spot."
I want to make sure we understand exactly what we're dealing with.
John nodded, swallowing hard. "Okay," he said, though his voice was tight. The doctor began by inspecting the area, his hands gentle but precise. He moved the skin carefully, pressing lightly around the lump, feeling its shape and firmness. John flinched, not from pain,
but from the sheer strangeness of it. It didn't feel like a bruise or a simple injury. It felt solid, abnormal, and deeply unsettling.
I want to run some tests, the doctor said after a moment. We'll do an ultrasound first, then possibly a biopsy if necessary.
I know this is stressful, but it's important to get clear answers.
Mary's grip on John's hand tightened slightly. We'll face it together, she whispered, echoing her words from the previous night.
The tests began almost immediately. John lay on a narrow bed trying to stay calm as the technician applied cool gel to the painful area. The ultrasound wand moved across his skin and John's eyes followed every movement, searching for some reassurance, some sign that this was nothing serious. But there was nothing to see. Only the strange shadows on the screen that seemed to hint at something unknown, something potentially dangerous.
After the ultrasound, the doctor returned. We need to do further tests, he said carefully. I recommend a biopsy to get a better understanding.
I want to be thorough and make sure we know exactly what we're dealing with. John's heart sank. He had faced hard work, storms and injuries on the ranch. But a biopsy, the thought of someone taking a piece of him to examine in a lab made him shiver. Fear mixed with frustration.
I understand, he said, trying to steady his voice.
Do what needs to be done. Mary rubbed his arm reassuringly. You're not alone, John.
We'll get through this. The biopsy was scheduled for later that afternoon.
Until then, they were left in a waiting room, a small, quiet space with pale walls and soft chairs. John sat, staring at the floor, feeling the weight of every passing minute. Mary tried to make conversation, but words felt useless. The waiting stretched on, each second longer than the last. Fast.
Finally, it was time. John followed a nurse into a sterile, bright room.
The procedure was explained to him step by step. He nodded, trying to focus on his breathing instead of the fear gnawing at him. The doctor's hands were steady, precise, and careful. When the needle pierced the spot, John tensed instinctively, a sharp sting traveling through him. It was over quickly, though, leaving him with a small bandage and a lingering sense of unease. Back in the waiting room, John slumped into a chair, feeling drained. Mary sat beside him, holding his hand, squeezing it gently.
It's done, she said softly.
Now we wait for answers. Hours passed slowly. John stared out the window at the world outside, at children playing and neighbors tending their gardens. Life went on, oblivious to the worry that filled this small clinic.
The waiting was the hardest part, the unknown stretching out like a shadow over everything.
Finally, the doctor returned, his expression unreadable. John felt his stomach tighten. Every fear he had held over the past weeks and days was pressing down on him all at once. He gripped Mary's hand, waiting for the words that would change everything. The doctor took a deep breath. John, the biopsy results have come back.
I need to be honest with you. You have a serious condition that requires immediate attention.
Bad. It's rare, but it is aggressive. We need to discuss treatment options as soon as possible. John's mind reeled. Serious. Aggressive. Immediate. Operation. The words spun in his head, a storm of fear and disbelief.
He had faced injuries, storms, and challenges his entire life, but this was different.
This was invisible, unknown, and potentially life-threatening. Mary's hand tightened around his. What does it mean? She asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. The doctor explained carefully, outlining the seriousness of the condition and the steps needed to treat it. John listened,
absorbing each word with a mix of dread and determination. He had always faced challenges head-on, and he intended to face this one the same way, even if it terrified him.
After the appointment, they returned to the motel, exhausted and silent. The weight of the diagnosis hung heavily between them.
John sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor.
Mary joined him, sitting close, her hand resting on his shoulder.
"This is real," John said finally, his voice low. "I can't just push through this like I do with everything else."
This is different.
Mary nodded.
"I know, but we'll face it together."
One step at a time.
The rest of the day passed in a blur.
Brace. John tried to eat, but his appetite was gone. He tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he felt the sharp memory of the pain, the hardness of the spot beneath his skin, and the fear of the unknown that lay ahead. By evening, John made a decision. He would not let fear control him. He would face whatever came next with the same determination he had brought to the ranch all his life. He would prepare himself mentally, physically, and emotionally for the battle ahead. Psst. Mary stayed by his side, offering comfort and strength. Together, they talked about the ranch, the animals, and the life they had built. They laughed a little, trying to hold on to normalcy even in the shadow of the diagnosis. That night, John lay in bed, staring at the ceiling again, but this time with a different feeling. But fear was still there, but alongside it was resolve. He knew that the coming days would be some of the hardest he had ever faced. The spot that had hurt so badly had revealed something horrific, something that could change his life forever. But John was a man who had never backed down from a challenge. He would face this one too, step by step, with Mary by his side, and with the same courage that had carried him through storms, injuries, and hard years on the ranch. The unknown was frightening, but John realized that he could not live in fear. Best, he had to confront it, understand it, and fight it. The road ahead would be long, filled with uncertainty, pain, and difficult decisions, but he was ready to begin the journey. As he drifted into a restless sleep, he felt a small sense of hope. The path was unclear, but for the first time since the pain began, he felt a spark of determination. He would face this challenge. He would discover the truth. And whatever came next, he would not face it alone. John woke early that morning with a heavy feeling in his chest. The motel room was quiet, almost too quiet, and the faint light from the window made the world outside seem distant and unreal. He rubbed the spot on his side, the pain a constant reminder that his life was about to change in ways he could not yet understand. Mary sat nearby, sipping her tea and watching him carefully. Her eyes were full of worry, but also determination, the same determination she had shown since the beginning of this ordeal. "Are you ready?" she asked softly, setting her cup down. John nodded, swallowing hard. "I guess I have to be." They returned to the clinic, their hands brushing briefly, each touch a small reassurance in the storm of fear surrounding them. The waiting room was familiar now, its pale walls and quiet hum of the fluorescent lights a reminder that this was the place where the truth would be revealed. John's stomach twisted with anxiety as they waited. Every small sound seemed louder than usual, the distant ringing of a phone, the soft shuffle of shoes in the hallway, the muted voices of nurses talking somewhere out of sight. When the doctor finally appeared, John's heart beat faster. The calm professionalism of his expression did little to ease the tension in John's chest. He followed the doctor into a small examination room, Mary close behind him, holding his hand. The doctor motioned for John to sit, his tone gentle but firm. "John, thank you for coming in," the doctor said. "We have the results of your tests, and I need to speak frankly with you." John felt a lump form in his throat. He nodded silently, bracing himself. The doctor continued, explaining what the tests had revealed. The spot on your side is not a simple bruise or minor injury. The biopsy shows a rare, aggressive condition. It requires immediate attention. This is serious, but we have options for treatment. The sooner we act, the better the chances of a full recovery.
John's world seemed to tilt. Serious.
Aggressive. Immediate. The words echoed in his mind, heavy and relentless.
He had faced storms, injuries, and long days of grueling work on the ranch, but this
was entirely different. This was unseen, unknown, and it had invaded his body without warning. Bear. Mary squeezed his hand, her grip firm and steady. We'll face this, she said softly. Together. You're not alone, John. John nodded, though his hands trembled slightly. He felt a strange mixture of fear and resolve. Fear because he did not know the full extent of what he was facing. Resolve because he knew that giving in to despair would not help him. He had always faced challenges head-on, and this would be no different. Beth. The doctor outlined the next steps carefully. There would be additional tests to understand the full scope of the condition, consultations with specialists, and a treatment plan that might include surgery or other interventions. John listened, absorbing the information in pieces, trying to focus on the facts rather than the fear rising in his chest. As they left the clinic, John felt drained. The weight of the diagnosis pressed down on him, heavier than any physical labor he had endured on the ranch. Mary walked beside him, her presence a small but steady source of comfort. They spoke little, each lost in their own thoughts, the road ahead feeling long and uncertain. Back at the motel, John sat in a chair by the window, staring at the world outside. Life continued as usual. Birds chirped, the wind rustled the trees, and cars passed on the distant road. But for him, everything had changed. The ranch, the animals, the daily routines, all of it seemed both urgent and distant at the same time. He had to recover, but he also had to prepare for the difficult months ahead. Mary brought him a cup of tea and sat across from him. "Babe, you've faced so much already," she said gently. "I know this is harder, but you have the strength to get through it." John managed a small smile, though it did little to ease the tight knot in his chest.
I didn't expect it to be this bad, he admitted. I thought it might be a bruise, a muscle strain.
Something simple. Mary reached across the table, taking his hand. Breaths. Life doesn't always give us simple things, she said softly. But we'll face it together. One step at a time. The days that followed were filled with appointments, tests, and consultations. John felt like he was living in a strange, unfamiliar world, one dominated by white walls, waiting rooms, and the quiet efficiency of medical professionals. Narration. Each test revealed more information, and each piece of news weighed heavily on him. The pain in his side was still there, a constant reminder of the condition he could not ignore.
Despite the fear and uncertainty, John found moments of clarity and strength.
He thought about the ranch, about the life he had built, and about the work that still needed to be done. The land, the animals, and Mary all gave him reasons to fight, reasons to face the difficult road ahead with courage. One afternoon, after a particularly long series of tests, John sat in the clinic's small garden, the sun warm on his face. He watched the trees sway in the wind, listening to the faint sounds of life outside the clinic walls. In that moment, he realized something important. While the diagnosis was serious, it was not the end. He had faced challenges before, and he could face this one too.
Mary joined him quietly, sitting on the bench beside him. They sat in silence for a while, letting the warmth of the sun and the gentle sounds of nature provide a small sense of comfort. "You're thinking about the ranch, aren't you?" she asked finally, a small smile on her face. "Psst. I can't help it," he said. "It's my life."
Bang. It's what I know. It's what keeps me grounded.
Mary took his hand, squeezing it gently. "And it will still be here when you're ready to return."
Right now, you need to focus on yourself, on getting better. We'll take it one day at a time.
John agreed, though the fear still lingered.
He had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite it.
And that's exactly what he intended to do. As the weeks passed, John began the process of treatment planning. We met with specialists, discussed surgical options, and learned about the care and recovery that would follow. Each meeting was difficult, each discussion a reminder of the seriousness of his condition, but he faced them with a quiet determination. He asked questions, learned about the steps ahead, and prepared himself mentally for the challenges to come. Mary was a constant presence, supporting him through every step. She accompanied him to appointments, helped him understand the information, and provided the emotional support he needed to keep going. Together they faced the reality of the situation, and together they found small moments of hope and comfort amid the fear. One evening, after a long day of consultations, John and Mary sat on the motel porch, watching the sunset. The sky was a brilliant mix of orange, pink, and purple, a reminder that beauty existed even in the midst of hardship.
I know this is hard,"
Mary said softly.
"but you're strong, John. You've faced storms, tough years on the ranch, and every challenge life has thrown at you."
"You can face this too!" John nodded, feeling a small spark of hope. "I'll do it," he said quietly. "I'll face it, and I'll come back."
The ranch, the cattle, everything I care about is still out there. I can't let this take that away from me. Bad.
That night, John lay awake in bed, thinking about the coming days. The diagnosis was serious, and the path ahead would be difficult, but he had resolved to face it head on. The pain in his side was still there, a constant reminder of the condition that had changed his life, but it was also a reminder of why he needed to fight. He thought about Mary, about the ranch, and about the life he wanted to return to. He knew the road would be long, filled with uncertainty, challenges, and difficult decisions, but he also knew that he had the strength to face it. He had faced hard years before, and he could face this one too.
As he drifted into a restless sleep, John felt a sense of determination. The spot that had hurt so badly had revealed a truth he could not ignore.
It had uncovered a challenge he could not avoid. And though the days ahead would be frightening and painful, he would meet them with courage, resolve, and the unwavering support of the woman he loved.
The journey was just beginning, and John was ready to face whatever came next.
The sun had barely risen when John woke that morning. The motel room was quiet, except for the faint hum of traffic in the distance. He lay there for a long moment, his mind heavy with the reality he had been facing for weeks. The pain in his side had become a constant companion, a reminder that the condition was real, serious, and relentless. But today was different. Today he would finally confront the horror fully and take the first real step toward recovery. Mary was already awake, quietly preparing tea. She glanced at him and gave a small, encouraging smile. "Ready?" she asked softly. John nodded, swallowing the tight lump in his throat. "As ready as I'll ever be," he said. The drive to the clinic felt longer than ever. The countryside, usually so familiar and comforting, seemed distant and almost unreal. John stared out the window, lost in thought. He thought about the ranch,
about the cattle he cared for, and about the life he loved. He also thought about fear, the fear that had shadowed him since the first sharp pain, the fear of the unknown that had grown heavier with each test and appointment. But along with the fear, there was determination. He had survived storms, harsh winters, and years of relentless work. He could survive this too. Once they arrived at the clinic, the atmosphere was tense but calm. The staff greeted them with quiet efficiency, guiding John to the treatment area. The doctor, calm and professional as always, explained the procedure once more.
John, this is going to be difficult, but it's necessary, he said. We need to remove or treat the area, and the sooner we do it, the better your chances of recovery.
You're strong, and you have people supporting you. That's a huge part of facing this challenge. John nodded. I understand, he said, trying to steady his voice. The procedure began, and John focused on his breathing. He kept his eyes closed, imagining the ranch, the wide fields, the gentle sway of the cattle, the sunlight glinting off the barn roof. The physical pain was immediate and sharp, but he had endured worse in his life. What mattered was that he faced it, that he did not let fear paralyze him. Mary held his hand, offering comfort with every squeeze, whispering encouragements he clung to like a lifeline.
Hours later, the procedure was complete.
John awoke groggy, disoriented, but relieved to feel that the immediate danger had passed. The doctor explained that the procedure had gone as planned, and the next step would involve recovery, careful monitoring, and additional treatment if necessary. John felt a mix of exhaustion and relief, the tension of weeks slowly lifting. The first days of recovery were difficult. John experienced pain, fatigue, and moments of doubt. The reality of what he had gone through weighed on him, and at times he wondered if he had the strength to continue. But Mary was there every step of the way. She helped him with small tasks, reminded him to take his medications, and provided the emotional support that was just as crucial as the medical care. John also learned to accept help from others. Neighbors, friends, and even some of the ranch hands offered support. They helped with chores, checked in on the cattle, and ensured that the ranch could continue running while John focused on recovery. At first, it was hard for him to accept this help. He had always been self-reliant, used to handling everything on his own. But he realized that accepting help did not make him weak. It made the fight against his condition possible. As days turned into weeks, John slowly regained strength. He started with small movements, short walks around the motel, and gradually built up to longer walks and light exercises recommended by his doctor. The pain in his side remained, but it became more manageable. Each small victory, each step forward reminded him that he could overcome this. Through it all, John reflected on the journey he had endured. Pain. He remembered the first sharp pain, the growing fear, the long waits in the clinic, and the moment he received the terrifying diagnosis. He realized how fragile life could be, how one small, seemingly insignificant pain could reveal something life-changing. But he also realized the strength that existed in facing such challenges, the courage to confront fear, the resilience to endure pain, and the love and support of those who cared for him. One afternoon after a particularly tiring day, John and Mary sat on the motel porch. The sun was warm on their faces, the sky a brilliant shade of orange and pink. John took a deep breath, feeling the breeze on his face. Breaths. I never realized how much I relied on the ranch until I couldn't be there, he said quietly. Mary nodded. Bet. It's a part of your life, but so are you. You need to take care of yourself first. The ranch will be waiting when you're ready.
John smiled faintly, a mix of gratitude and determination in his eyes.
He had always thought that strength meant enduring pain alone, but he now understood that strength also meant allowing others to help, facing fear, and refusing to give up even when the odds seemed impossible. Weeks later,
John received confirmation from his doctor that the treatment had been successful so far. The condition had been addressed, and while recovery was ongoing, the worst of the immediate danger had passed. Relief washed over him like a gentle tide, mixed with the lingering memory of fear that had once gripped him so tightly. He had faced something horrific, something that could have destroyed him, and he had survived. Returning to the ranch was the next step. John felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as he drove back down the winding dirt road, the fields and pastures stretching out before him. The ranch looked the same, yet everything had changed. He had changed. The experience had left him more aware, more grateful, and more determined to live fully. Desperate stepping onto the familiar soil, John felt a rush of emotion. He walked among the cattle, checking fences, and feeling the rhythm of ranch life once again. The physical work was demanding, but it was also comforting. The land, the animals, and the daily routines were grounding, reminding him that life could continue, even after fear and hardship. Mary walked beside him, carrying supplies and helping where needed. "Welcome home," she said softly, her smile warm and encouraging. Brask. John looked around at the ranch, taking in the sights, the sounds, and the smells. "It feels good to be back," he said quietly. "Better than I expected." The experience had left a lasting impression on him. He was no longer just a rancher. He was someone who had faced a serious hidden threat and survived. He had learned to appreciate life in a way he never had before, to value the small moments, and to lean on the support of loved ones without shame. Days turned into weeks, and John continued his recovery while gradually resuming his duties on the ranch. The pain in his side became a manageable memory, a reminder of the ordeal he had endured and the strength he had discovered within himself.
He found new appreciation for the land, for the animals, and for the simple routines that once seemed ordinary, but now felt precious.
He also took time to share his experience with others. Friends, neighbors, and even young ranchers sought his advice, and John spoke honestly about the importance of paying attention to one's body, of not ignoring warning signs, and of facing challenges with courage and determination. For peace, his story became a quiet inspiration, a reminder that even in the face of fear and uncertainty, it was possible to endure and recover. Mary stayed by his side through everything, her support unwavering. She had been his anchor, his comfort, and his partner in every sense. John realized that love and support were as vital as courage and determination. Together they had faced a terrifying challenge and emerged stronger, closer, and more grateful for life and each other. One evening, John sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the hills. The sky was a cascade of colors, orange, pink, and purple blending together. The ranch was calm, the cattle grazing quietly in the pastures. He reflected on the journey, the pain, the fear, the diagnosis, the treatment, and the slow, steady path of recovery. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for surviving, but for the lessons learned along the way. The spot that had hurt so badly, the thing that had seemed so terrifying and unknown, had revealed more than just a medical condition. It had revealed his strength, his resilience, the depth of his love for Mary, and the importance of embracing support and hope. It had reminded him that life was fragile but also precious, that challenges could be met with courage, and that even the most horrifying experiences could be transformed into lessons of strength and perseverance. As night fell over the ranch, John felt a quiet peace. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had also been enlightening. He had faced the unknown, confronted fear, and emerged stronger than he had imagined possible. The ranch, the animals, and Mary were all there, waiting for him, reminding him that life, though fragile, was also filled with beauty, resilience, and hope. And so, John continued his life on the ranch, forever changed by the small spot that had hurt so badly, and by the courage and love that had carried him through one of the most challenging times of his life. He had survived the horror, learned the true meaning of strength,
and discovered that even in the darkest moments, hope and determination could light the way forward.